Rob Plath and Wolfgang Carstens. Rob, how you doing, my friend?
Hey, how's it going? The
Excellent.
second show.
Second show. Elliott Smith, Everything Means Nothing to Me.
Someone found the future as a statue in a fountain. Meditation, looking backward in a pool of water. Wishes with a bow, something on its shoulder. They keep singing over everything. Everything means nothing to me. Everything means nothing to me. Everything means nothing to me. I picked up the song and found my picture in the paper, a reflection in the water, shouting by a man's skill, trying to salute people from a time when he was everything he's supposed to be. Everything means nothing to me. 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 Means nothing to me.
And if you don't believe that, I'll stab myself in the heart twice. That's a fitting show to begin the Madman morning show.
Yeah, it definitely is.
So let me ask you this. Well, it will go okay. We live in an essentially meaningless world. Human life has no intrinsic value. The only value my life has is the value I place upon it. And that value can't be transferred to you or to anyone else. I have to find my own reason to live. I have to find what matters to me. So let me ask you, Madman, what matters to you?
That song does.
I agree. Awesome song.
I mean, it's a paradox, really. You know, like there's a song saying that nothing matters, but at the same time, it's art and it's beautiful that someone's expressing honest truth. You know, and I guess you can find a meaning in someone being open and honest and bare and making art out of it. I guess, you know, there's meaning in it. So even though they're saying nothing matters, obviously they wrote a song and they have this beautiful, intense emotion. You know, I remember, I don't know what the exact quote was, but I always think of this, one of the only lines I remember. I think I remember two lines from Shakespeare's King Lear, and the one line is when everything is going horribly wrong, and someone says, I think it might be King Lear, says, if you could say it's bad, it's not bad. So if you could utter some kind of words, whether even if they're, you know, they don't, obviously they don't have to be positive words, but at the same time, if you're able to express it, you're not some mute that's fallen down a dark well that, you know, no one hears, then things aren't that bad, you know.
Well, you know, the one thing I find interesting that what you said.
I just got done rereading a book called the Diving Bell and the Butterfly, and it's a true story. And a guy who was an editor, and he was in his 40s. He was an editor for Elle in Paris, I think, and he had a great life. He was, had money and was, partying and living this happy, free life there. And all of a sudden, he got a stroke overnight, and he got something called locked in syndrome, and it's where you don't have any movement at all in your body, but your mind is all there. And but he was able to bat one eyelid, and someone sent in, his editor sent in a translator, and I forget who made the language up. I think the speech therapist helped him, and they made a way for him to blink his eye and write. And with, I think, 200,000 blinks, he wrote this beautiful memoir by that name that I mentioned. And the title's amazing because he was in a diving bell. That's what his body felt like he was down, trapped under the water, and paralyzed, but his mind still worked, and that was the butterfly part of it. And he was able to write this funny, dark book about suffering with blinking his one eyelid, and he could see only out of one eye. And it's amazing that, I mean, that's an extreme form of that. Elliott Smith had, functioned a lot more than that, but I see it like that, I guess, that.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. That would be a terrifying experience. I remember one time, like lucid dreaming, which I'm very competent at. One time I managed to, I was actually having like a nightmare, and I would become awake in my dream and I'd wake myself up. But then I was so tired that I'd fall back to sleep, and then I'd be back inside the nightmare and the killer's just waiting for me. So I'd force myself awake again, fall back asleep again, and the killer's getting closer, and now he's like talking to me, he's taunting me, he's going, "Hey man, you're fucking trapped here." Force myself awake again, and then fell asleep again, and then tried to force myself awake again, but I couldn't do it. So I basically became awake, and I opened my eyes. So now I'm laying in my room on my bed, and I'm fully awake, but I can't move my arms, I can't move my legs. It's like I'm paralyzed, right? And if I closed my eyes, I'd be back inside the dream, and if I opened them, I was just staring at my ceiling. Fucking terrifying, man. I can't even imagine this guy living like that.
Yeah.
Not that he had a nightmare inside his head, but I mean, just that experience of being, you can't even scream, say, "Hey, come fucking help me, man. Wake me up for fuck's sakes," right?
Yeah. And his there was a part where his son comes in. I think he had a son and a daughter, and his son comes in, and and he wants to hug him, and it's Father's Day, I think, and he can't do that, but he can write about it, about the torture. And I know people who have read. He said that in all that darkness, he makes you realize, like you mentioned this before, when you read something like that dark, it also could wake you up to appreciate what you have, that you could braille the buttons of your son's spine or your daughter's spine while you have motor skills, that work. And the same with Elliott Smith, like you could see, I guess you can have compassion for his suffering, and see the beauty in his suffering and creation. And at the same time, if you do have things that matter, it would highlight them even more, I guess, so I think you could see a lot of things in that stuff. So that's one of the things. I mean, you asked me, so that led to that.
No, I'm actually, that's pretty, I love it. The name of the book and the author again for everyone listening, because I think that sounds like a great book that people should read.
I think I can't say his name the right way, but it's called The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, and it's by Jean Dominique. I can't say his last name. It looks like it's Bauby, but it's B-A-U. Wait, B-A-U-B-Y, I think, Bauby. But I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong. But
well, still, yeah, the diving bell and the butterfly. Just search that.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting? Did Elliott Smith have epilepsy?
I don't. Not that I know of. I know.
Well, when you said that Elliott Smith was kind of going through the same suffering, what suffering?
Well,
like
I guess he was considered depressed. You know, he wasn't going through the physical suffering, but you know, I was thinking about different ways and
right.
I guess Elliott Smith was more of on a mental level, even though, you know, otherwise he was fine. You know, he had all his
right. Well, when I was reading about Ian Curtis from Joy Division, of course, he apparently had epilepsy.
Yeah, he did.
Like a severe case of epilepsy, right?
Yeah, he was only 23, I think, when he committed suicide.
Yeah, but I was reading too, and it was saying that like the more he was touring, and of course he was embarking on the North American tour the first night there, the more times the harder he toured and the longer he toured, the more the epilepsy was coming out, right? Like because it was like a stress. So they were saying like there were times when he would you know, the show would have to end because he would just go into an epileptic fit and they had to carry him off. There was another time they found him, you know, he'd been laying there for like 2 hours or something, had a fit in the washroom and like cracked his head open. And I mean, that's a whole different level of suffering right there, right? Like, I mean, that would make me depressed.
That's more in line with the physical part, you know, it makes you I think, you know, like sometimes you feel silly or foolish for being so down because of, you know, mental depression, you know, and then you see someone with mental depression and physical problems on top of that. So yeah, so it makes me realize that, you know, you could, it's easy, you know, not easy, but I guess it's heavy to have mental issues, you know, problems, depression and whatever it is, but to have physical suffering on top of it, you know, where, you know, your body is betraying you in some way, then, you know, that's even more intense, you know. I know Kurt Cobain supposedly had, I know it's not as extreme, but I'm not sure how hard it was, but I heard he had some kind of stomach issue that he was always has had horrible stomach pains, and I think he had, I don't know if it was colitis or something, where your own intestines or like eating themselves up or whatever. And I don't know, I heard it, I know, I saw a lecture by a naturopath, I don't know how to pronounce it, naturopath doctor who had it, that cured himself after 20 years, but he said it was horrible. Like you're having horrible bouts of the runs 15 to 20 times a day, and you lose all this weight, and you can't, you know, you're every time you eat you have issues, and you can only eat certain things, and it sounds painful. I don't know if Kurt Cobain's was that bad, but I know he wrote about it, and he talks about, you know, I saw an interview where he mentioned that. So, I mean, that goes along, I guess, with the epilepsy. Even that sounds more extreme, of course, because that's
well, like when you think about it, right? So you're going out into the public eye. One, you're in pain. Two, you're shitting yourself to death. And three, you're about to step on stage in front of a bunch of people. And then, or B, you're going into epileptic fits and like literally, you know, hemorrhaging on the stage. That's a whole level. Like, see it? I mean, that adds another dimension. You know, it's funny because we talked about, so, you know, of course, it would be great if human life had some sort of intrinsic value, like the kingdom of heaven chosen by God, however you want to define that. But I mean, I do not believe it does. Do I value humanity? Of course I do, but I'm giving value to humanity, right? If I'm like some sociopath and I don't value human life, well, you know what? Human life really doesn't have a lot of value. It's like it's very subjective and very us versus them type scenario. So we give our own life's value. Like, I mean, I love living. I love waking up in the morning. I love doing this show every week with you. I've given my life meaning, but it belongs to me. But that meaning could very well change as we were just talking about. So let's say I am a athletic swimmer and then I'm in a horrible car accident and I can no longer swim. So that was what was giving my life meaning. It can change on the drop of a dime. There's no intrinsic value safety net to rescue anybody, right? And for a lot of people, like you could talk about guys like Elliott Smith and Chris Cornell and Kurt Cobain, we're talking about this is a daily thing. This is like a, you know, like you always talk about, right? Keep the hearse in the rearview mirror. It's a daily struggle, you know? So it makes you wonder if that one thing that gives your life true meaning, like for me, it's writing. If I suddenly couldn't do that anymore, would I still value my life as much as I do now? You know?
Or if you had some kind of health issue, you know, like a lot of people, they go around running around saying everything's great, and then they get some health issue and then, you know, there are people that have health issues that are going through hell and still think life's great. But that's a true test, I guess. Like if your organs or whatever are committing mutiny on you, you know, and you can still see some kind of light, I guess that's I don't know, I guess that's more authentic than someone that never suffered and just thinks everything's great without suffering.
Right. Well, I think in a lot of cases too, like the human animal has to constantly be striving towards some goal. I mean, and that's what's giving your life meaning. Like you're striving towards something, you're trying to perfect something. There's something in this world that you care about and brings you ultimate joy, and you're doing it on a daily basis. In a lot of cases, I think a lot of people are very unrealized. I think they're walking around like sleepwalkers, and they've never really had that seminal experience that really, you know, shook them to their very core and made them question everything and made them search and made them find, and now they have that value. When these people sleepwalk through life, you know, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, then they hit 60 and you have something like, you know, a cancer diagnosis or a car accident or some debilitating thing like Kurt Cobain or then they'd have nothing. You know what I mean? Like they have nothing. It's like the only thing that they were doing was the most basic form of living. They had use of their limbs, they could eat, they could talk, they could go see movies, they could kill time in any number of ways. And now when that all of a sudden is thrown into jeopardy, that, you know, I can just imagine the suicidal thought there.
Yeah, when you realize all of a sudden that you're halfway through your life and you finally realize there's blood running through your vessels. And
exactly. That's why I love your poems in Belly Full of Anarchy so much. The way you explore the human body, right? Like how many people know how many ribs they have? How many people have, you know, understand how much blood is coursing through their body or how long their veins stretch? You know what I mean? Like people don't really know themselves. They don't know how they work. They don't know any of it.
Around the time I was writing that, I was asking a lot of people, and they, you know, they seem to know more about outside things, and it was interesting, you know, that what they knew. And
yeah, isn't that ironic, eh? The very thing that you covet and the very thing that gives you the magical gift is the one thing you don't know anything about.
Yeah, I remember someone said, you know, there was someone that was making fun of me because I didn't know how to tie a tie, you know, when I was in my 40s, you know, and but at the same time, I know I knew people that knew how to. There's nothing wrong with knowing how to tie a tie, but the same people didn't know how many ribs they had. So I thought it was funny, you know, that just under the lapels, you know, there's something that is very alien to you, but you know how to tie a fucking Windsor knot.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, right? Your whole life is filled up with this useless crap. You know, and we were talking about this the other day. You know, it's like, so you have to somehow, your life has to be valuable for you. You hate your job. Maybe you don't like your wife or your husband so much either. The kids are driving you nuts. You know, the strip bars don't hold the same allure they used to have. And you're running out of things and ways to give your life value, or just even maybe just occupy your time to make you at least, you know, convince you that it has value. And so a lot of people now are turning to social media, right? Like they're in Facebook, they're on Twitter, they're on YouTube, they're doing all these things, and they're finding that value in there. And now they're measuring their value with the number of imaginary friends they have, or their followers, or how many times they're retweeted, or how many likes they get.
And they feel a stabbing pain when the Wi-Fi goes out.
Exactly. You know, I'm
like
3 hours into my vacation, but I forgot my phone. Fuck, we have to go back. Yeah, no, it's incredible, right? And we talked about this before too, like how it's, you know.
By the way, I'm on my iPhone right now.
That's awesome. Well, I'm sitting in front of a laptop through Google Hangouts, through fucking YouTube, you know, like, I mean, you know, it has its value. I mean, this isn't what we do all day. I mean, nowadays you have people and they're all squirreled away in dark corners with their faces buried in an electronic device. I see kids at the mall, groups of kids. Like, you remember when we were kids and there was no computer and there was no cell phone. And I mean, you were lucky if you had an Atari video game system. Those days we'd go to the mall, we'd hang out, we'd go to the park, we'd throw the football, we'd play golf, we'd ride bikes, we'd shoot marbles, we'd, you know, sometimes we terrorized villages and burnt down barns and stole bikes and broke into houses and smoked drugs and got drunk. And we had all these experiences.
Good thing there weren't phone cameras back then, or else.
Yeah, well, you know, and it's funny too, because that's something else I wanted to talk about. But you know, we did all these things, and now you see these groups of kids and they're together at the mall and they're all have their face buried in a phone. You see people out on a date, a man, a woman in a fancy restaurant, she's texting somebody. It's really, really, really bizarre, you know. I
remember that show, the Howard Stern show, where I think it was a dedication to Chris Cornell. He really liked him. He had him on the show a bunch of times, and he was talking about him. He was walking around with his wife. He and his wife went on a walk, and he's singing Black Hole Sun the whole time, and she's texting her friends, and you know, and she annoyed him and he annoyed her by the way he was singing, and you know, but I think they got in a fight because he said, oh, well, I wouldn't be singing that over and over if you weren't texting all your friends the whole time on the walk.
Right.
It was funny.
Yeah, no, I listened to that show, and actually that was a beautiful show. So I tip my hat to Howard Stern for that one. That was great. But he's got a definite point, you know, like it's so weird, you know. It's like, I find, and this is the truth, my kids, they're either waiting for the time when they can get on the internet or looking for ways that they can get on the internet more. Like it's this complete, it's created havoc, you know, in my personal household. But these people now, they're looking for ways to get followers, to attract people to their channel, to get more likes and this and that. And I think that's where we see this. We now have this rise of streaming live acts of criminal activity, right? You have the rapes, the drownings, the beatings, the suicides, the murders, the animal cruelty. Like, I mean, people now, we're living in this. I read this article earlier today, and it talked about living in this snapshot society, right? Where no matter what's happening, it's not really validated until you take a picture of it or until you stream it live. And
yeah, it seems like a sort of like a small way to feel like your life's justified, in a small way to feel like you're, in a weird way, like you're immortal or something. You immortalize yourself by documenting it, you know, that what every little thing, not a work of art or something, but like everything you do all day long.
right, exactly. Exactly. And it's funny because there seems to be this you know, like you talk about this mortality, there's this blurred line. I mean, people are doing things that normally they wouldn't do, you know. It's so funny when you look back at the drowning that happened the other day, and the two boys that filmed it. They filmed this guy drowning in the lake, and they're actually laughing and giggling, and they're streaming it live, and people are watching. And nobody's helping this drowning man, because why? This is news. This has to be captured. This is really happening, right? I'm not really here. I'm just the cameraman.
Yeah, I didn't hear about that one. That's crazy.
You know, it's funny, and I got to say, I have a personal experience with this too, which is so bizarre. I almost hate to admit it, but so in here in my town, I just happened to be driving one day, and the lawnmower small appliance repair shop was burning to the ground. Like, it burnt to the ground. The thing burnt for like, you know, 6 hours, and like literally down to the ground. I happen to be driving by. I see this smoke billowing out. So I pull up my phone and I go onto Facebook Live, and I start streaming the video, and I'm like, holy shit, an Epic Rights Press book must have just landed, because that motherfucker's on fire, eh? And I'm just swearing and saying all this shit. And I basically get this cool video footage of the firemen fighting the fire, and the fire is just blazing. So anyways, my local news station ended up going, hey, we want to use that in our news article. So I'm going, well, okay. So they put it on their news, and the thing ends up getting viewed by, like, you know, 15,000 people in the space of like 4 days, right? So here I'm having this, you know, I have this juice of lightning. Hey man, these people are watching my video. And the funniest thing for me, of course, is that I'm like saying motherfucker and swearing and holy fuck and everything else. And this is actually on the news, right? They put this little disclaimer, oh, you may be offended by this footage. Okay, so that's part A. Part B, I'm driving home from work about 8 months later, and I come to like this section of the road where there's like a roundabout, and in the center there's this big stone like flower thing. This vehicle had driven straight into the flower thing and was on fire. Like, I'm not talking just like a little bit under the hood. Like, literally flames are licking out of the cab, out of the hood. Like, it's ablaze. If there's anybody in there, they're dead. There's no question. What do? I pull out my phone and I go to Facebook Live and I start recording it and going, wow, there's this big fire. There's this big fire. And I do this for like a minute. And I'm like, holy shit, fucking hang up, phone 911, say, hey guys, man, there's this truck on fire fucking right here. Like, this guy needs assistance now. But, you know, isn't it funny how my first instinct wasn't to phone 911? It was my second. And I ended up deleting the video because I feel bad. Like, how fucking retarded am I? But I actually did that. And that's what we're dealing with today in this day and age, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then I know I stumbled upon some videos on YouTube of I don't know what it was, but it was something like that. And on top of it, there was like 8 commercials in it. It was like, you know, and then on the news, like, they'll have a tragedy, you know, some story, and but there's a 35-second or 40-second commercial before you can watch it, you know, or, you know, it's interesting.
Yeah, isn't that funny? Yeah. Let's like monetize tragedy, right?
Yeah, that's really, yeah. I didn't know about that one. I like that you told that story.
Well, I mean, and that's something that I have to own, right? Like, I did that. I own it, man. And I just, it just strikes me, and maybe that's what's got me on this, just examining the issue in a little more detail, right? But yeah, I mean, so now you have like, I remember there was also that incident about that young girl who went streaming live on it was Periscope. She went streaming live on there, and she was saying, look, man, I'm really depressed. I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to kill myself. And all these people were watching, and they're texting her, like, or in the live chat, they're going, yeah, just do it. Just do it. Go ahead, do it. Kill yourself. Fucking do it. Life is pointless. Do it, do it, do it. And she ended up throwing herself under a train and dying. And that was all streamed live. You know,
Well,
but yet not one person watching like phoned fucking the cops or 911 and said, hey, there's this girl. She's down in the subway. She's talking about committing suicide. She's streaming live right now. You need to get down there. Not one person fucking did that.
Yeah, I wonder if there's some strange thing where the stream, since it has so many different things from commercials and ads and then real interesting or tragic mixed in, that it all becomes unreal. So there's a disconnection. I don't know, like, why someone would do that.
That's actually an excellent observation, Madman, because yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's a disconnect, right? When I seen the truck in blazing fire, I didn't think, oh my God, that guy needs help. I'm thinking, how can I fucking document this? Maybe I'll get on the news again. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It seems like, I don't know. I remember a long time ago, before, cell phones or whatever were around, sometimes I would look through the newspaper, and I thought it was weird. Like, there would be these stories, horrible, tragic stories. And then on the same page, there would be like a diamond ring ad and, a fur coat ad. And, I don't know. I just thought it was weird that they were, and it kind of reminds me, like that was kind of like, is like the, or is a form of the stream where you have these harmless sort of things, I guess. I don't know if they're harmless, but I don't like fur and diamond. I think those are damaging in a way. But at the same time, you're mixing in stuff, that is colliding with other stuff, and I don't know. Maybe for some people, it all becomes unreal. It's not really real. It's like watching television.
Yeah, like you have the rise of reality television, right? So now you have, all these people, and they're basically, and I guess to a certain extent, you have the YouTubers as well, right? Like you have now people, so you got the reality TV shows, and then you see these other people on YouTube who basically, they call them YouTube sensations. I've never actually followed any of them or really paid any attention to them. But now you have the rest of the world going, hey, I'm a pretty funny guy. I should have a reality show. We're just as funny as them. We do just as weird, interesting things as that. I could be a YouTuber. I should document my life, right? And then you get into this mindset where it becomes very important to you to get those likes and those followers and those retweets and those views, and because you're thinking in your head, hey, I could be a superstar too, right? So you start documenting everything, and that seems to be the route that it's going. Look what I had for lunch. It was so good. I saw this cartoon once, and the waiter came over. There's this man and this woman eating this beautiful meal, and the waiter came over and said, is there something wrong with the meal? You haven't photographed it yet. All right, Madman, you know what? This is a fitting time. Let's go. Ryan Adams, Wasted Years. You're listening to the Madman Morning Show with Rob Plath and Wolfgang Carstens.
I love that image of, what you just said.
From the ghost to gold, across the 7 seas, I'm traveling on, far and wide, but now it seems I'm just a stranger to myself and all the things I sometimes do. It isn't me but someone else. I close my eyes and I think I'm on. Another city goes by, in the night. Ain't it funny how it is? Soon gone away, and my heart is lying there, and will till my dying day. So understand. Don't waste your time always searching for those wasted years. Too much time on my hands, I've got you on my mind. I can't ease the pain so easily. And when you can't find the words to say, it's hard to make it through another day. And it makes me want to cry, I throw my hands up to the sky. So understand. Don't waste your time always searching for those wasted years. Face up, make your stand, and realize you're living in your golden years.
All right, welcome back to the Madman Morning Show with Rob Plath and Wolfgang Carstens. That was, of course, Ryan Adams singing the Iron Maiden song Wasted Years, and what a fucking amazing cover.
Yeah, I to get back to what you were saying before, I was out one day and I had this craving for pizza, of course, vegan pizza. There's a great little place, and I was trying to take photos of it, and it actually got fucking cold before I was taking photos. Now my pizza's cold, and I'm not gonna heat it up again.
That's awesome.
Like I was taking all different angles of it, and and by the time I got so caught up in it that I and then I bit into it. At least I didn't burn the roof of my mouth like I usually do. That was the only good thing.
That's awesome. Well, it's funny too, because that's a great example of our society, right? Like, we must capture it.
Yeah, it's like
it's funny too, because
I wonder what that is. That, like, where, I mean, people used to, of course, photograph things before, with old style cameras, film cameras, but I don't know if they did it as much as, it wasn't so easy. It was more expensive because you had to develop film, and, so I understand documenting because that's what artists do, and musicians, and, painters, writers, whatever. But now it's just like, sometimes it comes before, the actual real thing, like picking up the pizza and eating it, or sticking the fork into the food,
Right.
Also,
well, it's funny too.
It's interesting too that it's, I don't know, sometimes it feels like maybe it's like a thing about meaning too, like you're trying to show people that you're having fun or enjoying life or something, like when you take, no one usually, well, you could take pictures of tragic stuff like you mentioned, but usually I think it would be funny if people documented their fights or something, like here's Joe like spitting at me or something, and the fight, well, not spitting at, like spitting out these curse words that, and you have someone doing something negative more. But I guess people do that too, but usually you see people taking pictures of their food or whatever, whatever they're doing in the moment, I guess.
Well, it's funny because we're talking about, I think that's a great observation too, because you almost need to validate the fact that you're having a good time. So
Yeah,
it
yeah,
makes you
it's
wonder,
like
right?
that.
Who you trying to convince? You trying to convince yourself, or is it important for you that everyone else understands that you're having a good time? So instead of having a good time, you've now become this documentary of your own life, right? You know, it's so funny too, because I just went to go see Adam Lambert and Queen. It was an amazing show, absolutely amazing. So I had my phone. So like for like 20 minutes before the show, it'd be like every minute there'd be like this big boom, boom. Oh, I just freaked my dog out. Sorry, Tala. um, and this went on for 20 minutes. So I had my phone ready because I knew something was coming, right? And then as it got closer and closer to the showtime, they had this big giant screen that started shaking and shaking and shaking, and then all of a sudden that big robot, the Queen robot, busts through this big screen and sticks his head through, and it out holds his arm, and then Queen comes out, and I took the video of the beginning, and then I turned my phone off and I put it away, and I didn't pick it up again for the whole show. And I enjoyed the show. But as I'm looking around, there's all these other people who are actually enjoying the show through the lens of their fucking phone. But you're actually here, motherfucker. Like, put your phone away. You're actually fucking here. You could actually just, why do you need to document it, right? And my wife, who had taken a couple videos during the show, she turned to me afterwards when we were leaving, and she says, you know, I don't know why I did that. Like, why was I watching it through my phone? I was actually there. You know what I mean? Like, I should have just maybe put the phone away. And it makes a great point, you know, like, are you living, or are you just living to prove that you're living? Like, who are you?
Yeah, I like that. It's like, I think
your pizza got cold, buddy.
yeah, some people, like that day, I think I probably, of course, was in some dark mood, because I usually, you know, I don't know, recently I haven't been eating pizza that much, so that was like some kind of, you know, food to cheer me up. And I was probably, you know, maybe taking a photo like that is like masking your mood, you know, and pretending, you know, you're having fun and you're not. You know, it's just like when you see people out, you know, sometimes you see them happy in a photo, but they're really wanted someone to, you know, take a, maybe give someone the camera to take a picture of them, and pretending they're, you know, they're having fun when they're really, you know, they're really not. Right. Or something like that. I don't know if that made sense, but
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely true. You know, whether it's a picture of your lunch or a picture of who you're with, or, you know, hey, Rob, let's get together. Come on, we got to do a selfie, right? And then I'm still here with you, but now we've just taken a selfie. Now I'm uploading it to Facebook. I'm uploading it to Twitter. I'm writing a funny caption. Hey, look, 15 people liked the photo of you and I together. So, well, as Howard Stern says, well, maybe you should put your fucking phone away and let's be together. Or I'm going to keep singing Black Hole Sun until you fucking drop to your knees, right? And Howard Stern, let's face it, I love you, brother, but your voice ain't fucking Chris Cornell, man. You know?
That's definitely true. There was two wrongs there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
you know, it's funny too.
I think he was doing, he says he didn't realize it, but he was doing like this goofy old, it sounded like he was in the 20s singing it, you know, like this, you know, this old time, you know. So.
Yeah, that's too funny, man. Yeah, I don't know. I try to make it a point. You know, it's interesting. Like in my life as a writer, prior to having my family and my wonderful wife and my wonderful kids and everything else, I mean, I was literally would just be sit down and write. You know, I would write all the time. I'd have my face buried in a computer screen. And, you know, like 5 years into the marriage, my wife said, she said, hey, you know, like, I'm actually here too, man. You know, like, you know, why don't you show me some attention? And that was a turning point for me. And so now I've got into the habit now where I don't actually go on the computer. Like I'll go do my day job. I'll come home. I don't turn on my computer. I don't go to my office. I don't do anything. You know, my wife and I and the kids will go for picnics or to the park or camping or hiking or to a movie or go get ice cream. We do things as a family, right? And it was a turning point for me. And I think a lot of people really need to kind of maybe, learn that lesson, right? Like you're actually alive, man, and you're here with someone real right now. I'm talking to you. I'm not Googling, something else or texting other people. Like I'm here with you. We're here together. We're you, me, and our listeners. We're here together, and we need to acknowledge that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And if you don't like who you're with, then you need to find someone else to be with, right? Because if you're not having fun, it just ain't worth it.
Yeah, yeah. I think I always remember reading something. I think it was an interview with Charlie Parker, the jazz musician, and he said something like he named the top three things, and he said first comes the horn. Then he played the sax, but he said horn, and then I don't know if that's another word for it, or I always think a horn is something. But he said uh, the horn, drugs, and then women, and then that that was his three top things. But supposedly, he was the best, but at the same time, he was difficult having relationships, I think, supposedly, and some people take certain things, over other things, over relationships, and
Absolutely. Well, and I mean, I 100% agree with that. Like, it's completely true, right? We do have this hierarchy of things that are important to us, and what we would place. Like, if I had to pick between this and this, I would choose this. If I had to pick between this and this, I'd choose this. That's human nature.
yeah.
I think nowadays it's like the social media, the cyber you has completely trumped everything.
Yeah, it's like an alter ego, like it's like another self or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or like that movie, I remember watching the
Like, I
movie
mean,
Avatar, it was like that, like you have a whole other virtual life or something.
it's funny, but let me ask you the question. So, when you wake up in the morning, what is the first meaningful thing that you do?
Uh,
Now, what I mean is, are you checking your Facebook? Are you checking your emails? Are you spending some time with the cat? Are you taking
I
the
think
dog for a walk? You know what I mean? Like, what is the first meaningful thing you do?
I think peeing.
I said meaningful. No,
That's really
that's
meaningful.
essential.
I
That's
appreciate.
essential because I mean,
I
taking a
no, I
shit,
know,
unless you're Kurt Cobain and you got to shit 15 times a day, maybe that is a meaningful thing.
but I'm
But
very grateful that I could do that. So on my own. So, no, no, seriously, probably, yeah, yeah. I probably make tea or something, and put some music on,
oh,
and
there you go. Put some music on. Yeah, that's good.
put some music, put the Smiths on or something, or someone, or uh, and then um, pet the cat or pick the cat up, and also make some tea or something, and open the. It's very dark in here, but open the little, the paper shade that's all torn up I have on the front door, and let some light in. So yeah, things like
Right.
that.
That's awesome.
I don't
So
know if
let so
they're
how
not
long
like
before you
what.
so let me ask you, so how long before you acknowledge that alter ego of yours?
Uh, well, that comes along with it because I guess through habit, then you open the laptop. Of course, I probably check. I probably I should insert that in there that I probably check my phone just as much as I do. It's equal with the other things because it's I don't know. It's
So let me ask you
it's
this though.
built
Is
in now. I never used to. I didn't get a phone until I think I was 30, a cell phone until I was 36, and someone gave me one and said they gave me this tracker phone, and they said they said, oh, you should have this. I think it was, I'm not sure what they meant by it. I think that they thought I should have that, so in an emergency or something. They thought I was a little crazy at the time, but
right.
But yeah, so but now I have it so long that I think it's like peeing, actually checking your phone. It's like another part of your body, you know.
See, so, and that's a very honest answer, and that's exactly the type of answer that I think most people would give. So let me ask you though, I want to go just a bit deeper here. So we're talking peeing, tea, music, uh, petting the cat, letting light into the room, checking your phone at which point in time, or looking at the laptop, either the laptop or the phone. In your, if you had to place those things in order 1 to 10 or whatever, where is checking the phone or opening the laptop on that list? Is it number 1? Is it number 2? Is it number 3? Which one is it?
I think it's probably up in the top 3, probably, because it's like another,
right,
like another, it's like a mini brain or something. So it's you know, it's got, and it's, the phones now have so much stuff on it, you know, that, you know, your work is related to it, your, you know, any kind of personal relationships are related to it, the current horror story in the new, you know, that is America now is related. Right. So it's, I guess it's just your link to everything, your personal world and the, you know, the outside world. So yeah, it's like, it's kind of like, I guess it's almost like opening the shade, you know, like it's like it's letting the light into the world, I guess, you know. So
right.
It's
so, you know, so I mean, yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think 99.9% of the people are going to 100% agree with that, right? It's in the top 3 because this alter ego has become an extension of ourselves, which is the reason why I'm going to film the truck burning and not actually phone 911, because I'm thinking, hey, how can I make this work for me? How can I get on the news with this or whatever, right? So I guess maybe I have this perverted sense of values, you know, like maybe that shouldn't be in my top 3, you know.
Well, I see it as good too, because you know, you could, it's really cool at the same time to, you know, it's easy to explore. You can look up quotes or a book or music, or, you know, so I think there's a bad part, of course, and there's a good part, you know. Like one time I couldn't sleep, of course. That's always a problem, but you know, I can wake up. You know, you say you wake up in the middle of the night. You know, you were sleeping, but then, you know, all of a sudden you can't sleep. So I looked up a book, you know, that I didn't know about. You know, I think I just, you know, Googled some author or whatever, and I read something, and it actually made me happy that I discovered the book. And then I read a little bit of it, and then I went back to sleep. So it could be good, it could be bad though, you know, of course. So opening the shade could be bad too, because sometimes though, I think the sun is like a circular saw blade on your soul. Or you know, so I don't know. But
I know when birds start chirping that it's you know, that signals the end of the show.
It was.
You know, I totally, like, I understand completely what you're saying, and I mean, but you know, and it's funny too, and I mean, nobody wants to admit it, but let's face it, there's no such thing as human equality. There isn't. I mean, if you want to have human equality, you need to have universalized education, universalized upbringing, universalized set of everything. Like, I mean, everyone needs to be on the same page, to have learned the same things, read the same things, left to wander in their gardens in the same way in order for there to be any sort of universality, right? So, I mean, and which is why democracy is, you know, according to Plato, the worst form of government, because, you know, if 1 million idiots agree, does it make it the right thing? No, of course not, right? Like, enter World War II. So, you know, like when you sit there and you say, well, you know, I'm using it to do this and to do this and do this, that's great, but that's you, right? I mean, that's
Oh
not
yeah,
everybody.
yeah, of
And
course.
it's like where does that, you know, how blurred is the line between that and the
Oh yeah,
person
yeah, yeah. I
texting while you're
understand.
in the same room with somebody else?
Yeah, no, I understand. I didn't. I um. Yeah, it depends. I guess like there's other people that are just. I guess if you think everything's meaningless, I guess some people underneath might feel that even though they might not admit it, and they're just maybe they're using that their 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 extension of their of themselves, you know, that other form of themselves is meaningless. They're doing meaningless things, I guess, you know, on their phone or their laptop or whatever. So yeah, I don't know, I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, I could see
Well,
it. I could see it
it
being.
totally makes sense.
Yeah.
It completely makes sense because we're talking about, you know, you know, I should mention too, and of course you know this, but I'll for our listeners, um, we're going to be joined today by Marsha Epstein, who of course is a renowned suicide prevention therapist. She works a lot with people who basically can't find meaning in a meaningless world. I mean, let's face it, that's what the issue is here. Um, and so I just, what made me think of that, of course, is, you know, you're talking about, um, you know, how these, how you're finding meaning with your cell phone and how other people are finding meaning with their cell phone. Um, and in a sense, if that's giving their life meaning, as long as they're not streaming crime or something, maybe we shouldn't be so hard on them, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, I also, to be honest, a couple of times I woke up and I played dominoes on the phone, and I was like, "What the hell am I doing? I'm playing dominoes on my phone in the middle of the night while
That's awesome, man.
we're spinning in space." And you know, it reminded me of that horrible experience when I played mini golf when I was 15, and I looked around and I said, "What am I doing here on the plastic turf with this little club hit with the with the corkscrew hedges, and you know the little it was a little mini Eiffel Tower." And actually I think we were holding up people because we were a bunch of crazy teenagers just whacking the ball all over the place trying to get the worst score. And these big guys, these kind of yuppie guys, probably like 6 or 7 years older than us, they started rolling up their shirt sleeves and swinging their clubs subtly, you know, they had their girlfriends with them, and they wanted to beat us up, I think, over the miniature Dutch windmill. And you know, and that's when I flung my club over the hedges and just got out of there. But the same feeling, I understand, you know. I woke up and I started playing dominoes, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I kind of felt like weird doing it at the same time. I said, "What am I doing here playing dominoes?" You know, but
Right.
I guess you can't always start reading some book, you know, and thinking in the middle of the night, you know,
Yeah.
maybe to do something.
Well, I mean, thinking has its place in time, right? You
Yeah.
know, it's funny, but I mean, since, okay, so, you know, everyone's always like, oh, how come there's never been another Shakespeare, right? Or look at a guy like Friedrich Nietzsche, you know, one of the most brilliant motherfuckers ever walked the face of the planet. Whereas the Nietzsches? Um, these guys, they were dealing with the same things that everyone else is dealing with today, which is basically boredom, right? Like it's this search for meaning, it's boredom, it's um you know, what am I going to do today to like occupy my time? How am I going to spend my time? You know, is it a valuable use of my time or is it not? But the difference is today, like, of course, those guys, right? Like, what did Shakespeare have? Did Shakespeare even have a clock? I don't know. He basically had time. Time was his enemy, right? Friedrich Nietzsche, time was his enemy. Dostoevsky, time was his enemy. Schopenhauer, any of these guys, Kant, Mill, you know,
I read that.
on Paul Start, right? They had time as their enemy. We all have time as our enemy. And I think today there just seems to be a lot more ways for us to kill time.
Yeah, that's true. I wanted to go back to what we were talking before and what you just said and mix it. with the social media and different. I think it's a little different, but I know I read somewhere that someone, some authority on Schopenhauer, I don't know if it's true or you never know what's true, but they said that even when he was writing, he's writing all this stuff about the vanity of existence and, the suffering of the world and everything's an accident and it's something that should have not have been. But at the same time, they said he used to look to philosophy journals and combing through the index looking if someone mentioned his name, and I see that, like I know he's a I love him, he's one of my favorites, but at the same time, is that like, kind of like someone wanting a like, or a thumbs up or, or whatever, a heart, I know not everybody's Schopenhauer, of course, but he wanted some kind of thumbs up that someone mentioned his name or something, or referred to him.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, yeah. It's funny when you look at a guy like Friedrich Nietzsche too, right? Like he got the end, right? Why I am so great, why I am so wise, why I am such a beautiful motherfucker. I must leave testament of myself, right? Which is basically how his last book went. It's the same thing today, right? Like that's all we're doing, but we're not looking inward anymore. We're looking outward, right? How can I occupy myself today? Where can I go to YouTube or Google or check Facebook or, we're occupying ourselves in much different ways than they were because really they had time as the enemy.
Yeah, I think, I notice, I see people, and I admit to doing it too. Like if I'm eating something at the same time, I forgot what it's like just to eat. So I might be watching something on the computer or on the phone, whether I'm out or at home. It's weird. I got so used to putting that stuff in my head that I usually have to have something on, but it stems back to when I was a kid too. It seemed like there was always this little black and white TV on while I was eating, and so it's not just the phone, but I guess it's easier to do it with the phone because you can carry it around, and but I see a lot of people doing that. Like they seem like they're watching clips on YouTube while they're eating, and they just don't sit there and eat, and concentrate, I guess, on eating, but maybe they're enjoying both. I guess you can't, I don't know, maybe it enhances it, maybe, I'm not sure.
Well, I guess, yeah, and that's a good point, right? Like the one thing that's been removed is being alone in your own skin. You can always have some sort of background noise. Like I remember even reading like geez, I'm almost tempted to think it was Nietzsche, and he talks about, just the record player and what a big revolution that was, where he could sit in his room and listen to a record, wind it up and have it come through that big megaphone dealio.
Yeah, the same thing. I guess, it's the same with that too. I mean, before I had a phone, I haven't had a TV in a long time, but I would put music on too. I mean, I think that enhances it to a point, but I don't know if there's an addiction now to, I guess, doing multiple things at once to keep yourself, fully occupied where you're not.
Right.
I don't know. I'm not sure how I think about it. I think it's good and bad, it's the same when you go to the movies, you eat and watch, you do two things at once, or some people at home are doing three things maybe, but I don't know. I could see a bad side to it because it seems like an addiction and, you're not doing the one thing fully, but the same thing with headphones. You see a lot of people doing stuff and they're wearing, they have their iPod on and they need the soundtrack to their life. They can't just not have streaming music in their ears as they're walking through the city or on the train or, wherever or So yeah, I don't know. I think it could be good and bad, I guess.
Well, when you think about it, right? Like, I mean, what you're doing when you have, like you say, you have your earbud in all the time, or you always have something playing in the background, you're silencing that inner voice, you know, because we are all alive and we're going to die. And as we talked about in the last show, right? Birth is the murderer. I mean, you're born to die, right? Or Motorhead, Killed by Death. So you're silencing that inner voice and you're never really exploring those paramount fundamental questions that we all must wrestle with. Whether, like, we're born, we grow up, we become adults, and then we're expected to it seamlessly integrate into society. And there's certain questions that we must ask ourselves, right? Like whether or not even our lives have value, which we talked about earlier. So by always keeping something in the background, you're silencing that inner dialogue. You're trying not to think about it. Maybe you're going to die and you don't want to think about it. But if that's the case, then I beg to differ that you even realize that you're alive at this point.
That's true. That's true. Unless you're listening to a Nietzsche podcast.
Exactly. Well, I mean, and that's really why, philosophy is the purest form of literature, in my opinion. I mean, here's people who have sat down and explored these fundamental questions in a very exciting and experimental way. So you go back to the time of Shakespeare, the time of Nietzsche, the time of Baudelaire or Rimbaud or any of these guys. I mean, they don't have this cell phone. They don't have this TV. They don't have this video player. They don't have this CD player. They don't have earbuds. They listen to their internal dialogue, and when they get together with somebody for lunch or for a coffee or ask someone out on a date, they're actually there with those people. There's nothing to distract them from the fact that they're one-on-one having this human contact. And I think that's where this whole digital age has completely overturned everything, and that's where it's all gone wrong, is because you don't have that anymore. You always have that alter ego.
I have a poem for that. Could I read it?
Yeah, let's do it.
I have it's called Body Bag Nation. I had these ideas in mind when I wrote it. The masses, the so-called living, don't know it, but they're actually dead. Each zipped up within their skin, a nation full of flesh, body bags, equipped with eye holes to pretend they see and mouth holes to emit bullshit and nose holes to waste precious fucking air.
Love it. Love it. And maybe that's the thing, right? Like when you talk about like your poem, I am my own pallbearer, right? And every day you're lugging your suicide around. Like you're lugging, not your suicide, but you're lugging your body around. You're lugging your death around. Your death is on your shoulders and you're walking through life with this. That's gorgeous, right? I mean, and that only comes from someone who has explored those paramount questions, who am I? What is life? What is the value of my life? I mean, that's how you arrive at that point, right? But for the most part, I mean, I think we're looking at a body bag nation here.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah, you could, like you said before, it depends who's using the tools, I guess, and if it's someone that's avoiding everything, then, and not working away at, at, like Kafka says, like chipping away at that frozen sea inside ourselves, then maybe it is something that's making you not fully alive and not evolving, so, but I don't know. Sometimes I think people underneath, no matter, how positive they are, they might believe that everything's meaningless. So they tend to do a lot of meaningless things, and maybe they don't want to admit that there's nothing there's everything is just accident. So they play dominoes all day long, or or listen to music that might not hit home, you know.
You know, it's interesting. I had this thought this morning, actually, when I was driving my wife to work, and it dawned on me that perhaps suicide is a chance to take back control. You know, you're talking about, okay, so birth as the murderer, and we're all born to die, and let's face it, we're all going to motherfucking die. We don't know what's going to happen after that, but we know for a fact that our bodies are going to die. Perhaps suicide is a way of taking that control back, you know, and I could see it in the case of like Jack Kevorkian and his suicide machine. I mean, here are people who are saying, look, I have a degenerative disease. I want to take my life and go out as I am now and not what I'm going to turn into, which I suppose could even be Curtis as well, right? Like, I mean, that's kind of the whole, what I garner from that story. So I think that to go forward and to, well, you know what? I don't know, man. I tell you what, my friend, you're listening to the Madman Morning Show with Wolfgang, Carstens, and Rob Plath. This is Juan, Number of the Beast.
Left alone, my mind was blank. I needed time to think, get the memories from my mind. What did I see? Can I believe that what I saw that night was real and not just fantasy? Just what I saw in my own dreams were the reflections of my woman staring back at me. 'Cause in my dreams, it's always there. The evil face that twists my mind, brings me to despair. 666, the number of beasts. Hell and fire, spawn to be released. Torches blaze, sacred chants will praise. And as they start to cry, their hands held to the sky. In the night, fires burning bright. The ritual has begun, Satan's work is done. 666, the number of beasts. Sacrifice is going on tonight. I'm coming back, I will return, and I'll possess your body, and I'll make you burn. I have the fire, I have the force, I have the power to will take its course.
All right, you're listening to the Madman Morning Show with Rob Plath and Wolfgang Carstens.
Whoa.
Another fantastic cover. Yeah, buddy.
Yeah, I found that old poem about miniature golf.
Yeah, let's hear it.
It's called Let Them Burn. I was 16. I was 16 the one and only time that I went miniature golfing. I was with a bunch of friends and we were goofing around trying to see who could get the worst score when two couples about 6 years older than we were glared at us from the other side of the little arched wooden bridge because we weren't following rules and were keeping them from their next obstacle. The tall athletic guy in a button-down shirt pushed his sleeves up and began cracking his big knuckles. The other shorter, stockier guy subtly swung his clubs. Jesus Christ, I said, these guys were going to fight over a miniature Dutch windmill. Then it hit me. These were the guys whose girls wore Winnie the Pooh sweatshirts. These were the guys who wore hockey jerseys just before fucking. These were the guys who went to batting cages after their mother's funeral. These were the guys with Mickey Mouse on their urns. Suddenly I was the universe sick to its own stomach in this landscaped hell of blue bricks and plastic green turf. I wanted a scalding vomit to erupt from the skies. I chopped at the little white ball like my putter was an axe, sending it into the corkscrew hedges, and then I flung my club over the log fence into the darkness of the pines. That's the
I love it. That's too funny. And you know, it's funny too because that actually reminds me a lot of well, the story, the backstory there, your poem Playing Simon Says with Death, right? Because that's kind of what mini golf is. At least it's been my experience. You know, you take the family out for mini golf and you miss a shot, miss a shot, miss a shot, miss a shot, and then everyone's missing their shots, and now all of a sudden you have a lineup of people waiting for you, and they got to get by you, but you can't make the shot, right? It's very oppressive.
Yeah.
It's like playing Simon Says with Death, right? You know, same thing. You know, yeah. I wanted to ask you a question. So do you think, and you know, this is entirely like a left turn here, but do you think that when other people commit suicide, does it desensitize everyone else to the very idea of suicide? Like what may have been taboo or forbidden or it's against the law, all of a sudden, you know, someone like Chester Bennington or Chris Cornell or Elliott Smith or Robin Williams, right, recently a few years ago, when these people commit suicide, do you think it desensitizes you to the very idea, and maybe what never seemed like a good idea at the time could now possibly be an escape ski?
I think, I don't know if this is answering the question right, but I think it might horrify people to see that maybe everything isn't worth it, and someone just got up and proved it. So I think underneath it makes everyone feel that meaninglessness, and how especially if it's someone that had everything, but it also might do the same thing if it's someone that was horribly struggling, you know, in other ways, and you know, and they gave up. So I don't know. I think it puts something in. It puts the thoughts and fears into people's minds that this is all just for nothing, you know, and that it could easily be, you know, someone just got up. And I remember in in Memory Gardens, which is a beautiful poem by Allen Ginsberg, written for Kerouac after he had died. And he didn't commit suicide, but he said he was doing it halfway, like doing it slowly with alcohol. He was drinking maybe like 2 or 3 bottles, full bottles a day right before he died. But he said in Memory Gardens, because Kerouac was really also into Buddhism, and he said Jack Kerouac said the universe doesn't exist and died to prove it. So it could be the same thing. Like some people, they get fed up and see through everything in some weird way. I guess they just end the world for themselves, and other people, it strikes fear into them in a way because they see that, like Ginsberg said, that the universe doesn't exist really. It's everything's just an illusion. So
Right.
I think it makes people not attack. It could give that fear that that nothing's real, maybe, and this is all fake, and but I don't know. That's what I think it could. Because some people just seem so angry when they hear about it, or they feel so they just get really stirred up inside, and I think that might be one of the reasons, that.
Well, it's interesting when you think. So Ian Curtis, the lyricist and singer for Joy Division, of course, committed suicide by hanging on what was it, May 18th. And then Chris Cornell, who's a big fan of Ian Curtis, of course, killed himself 37 years later on May 18th.
Yes.
And then you have Jessup Bennington, who killed himself on what would have been Chris Cornell's 53rd birthday, which was actually our first broadcast last Thursday.
Yeah.
And then when it is weird too, because if you think about a guy like Hemingway, who of course put a shotgun in his mouth and took his life at 61, his father committed suicide, his brother committed suicide, and his sister committed suicide. And then of course you can even go even further, and Margot Hemingway, who of course was Hemingway's granddaughter, ended up committing suicide. So here you have, 5 generations, or 5 suicides in 4 generations, right? So it makes you wonder, and especially when you look at a guy like Robin Williams, who of course killed himself, and you start going, well, he had everything, right? So here's Robin Williams, and he took his own life. And I mean, look at me, I'm struggling, I'm suffering, I'm doing this. And yet this guy who had everything in the world, money, fame, riches, everything, he killed himself. So you know what?
Yeah, supposedly
maybe that's a viable option for me, because really, what's the fucking point? And it makes you wonder whether or not it's like, you mentioned last week about that guy who committed suicide, and then the authorities came and said, well, that's against the law. So they revived him and then hung him for committing suicide after he just sliced his throat and then his head ripped off. So it's kind of like this. It seems like it's almost, it has to be forbidden, right? Because if everyone's doing it, then maybe I should too.
Yeah, I could see it like it might. It's just like if I think in a weird way, I think it might make people feel the same way if they discovered that there was no God. It's the same. It could strike fear into someone that, all of a sudden, that someone that has everything, and like that poem Richard Cory. I don't have it with me, but it's that poem by Arlington. I forgot his name, Arlington.
Right.
Where everyone looks up to this guy that has graces and money, and he's well dressed, and he's like floats around, on air practically, because he's so graceful and perfect and everything. But then at the end of the poem, you're not ready, and all of a sudden it said, and Richard Cory went home and put a bullet through his head, and then it just ends there. But yeah, I think it makes people scared to think that, maybe it's showing that it's the universe is not real to some people, and it might make them feel disassociated with, as well, But what I just wanted to mention, I think Robin Williams was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and I'm not sure if that's. It seems like that, and I think he had two things, but I think, or maybe I got it wrong, but he was diagnosed with some kind of illness that I think he was afraid to deal with. I think that was one of the reasons, but that doesn't. I mean, there are other people that do it that don't have that, any issues like that, but.
Right.
But I don't
Well,
know.
like Elliot Smith took a butcher knife and stabbed himself twice in the heart, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of sides to everything to that question. I think, it, I I don't know. It's when you think about it, if you think about it, it's one day I was sitting around thinking about it, and you see everyone seems to separate homicide and suicide, but isn't suicide murder? Because you're not murdering someone else, but you're murdering yourself. So I guess that's, if you see it that way, that's shocking. Like that, people don't kill, a lot of people, that, think that it's, most people think it's wrong to kill someone. And then when someone comes along and murders themselves, it just throws them off. Like, that they saw things so badly that they destroyed themselves.
Well, and maybe that's the whole basis for it being illegal, right? Because murder is murder. It's some kind of absolute, it's an absolute rule. It's really weird too, because like, okay, Soundgarden has been on my playlist for the last 20 years. I've listened to it daily. I've listened to it in the house, in the yard, in the truck. I've always taken great solace in Chris Cornell, and his voice and his lyrics and his songs, and, Soundgarden, Audio Slave, Temple of the Dog. Like, I mean, I've embraced him even his solo career. So, I still continue to play it. Like, I actually listened to Super Unknown today. And my wife is like, well, why are you listening to this, right? Like, knowing that Chris Cornell killed himself, why are you listening to this? Well, I mean, I liked it before. I'm not going to stop listening to it now. But, it's really weird because she actually has a valid argument, because now when I listen to it, and of course you listen to songs like The Day I Tried to Live and Blow Up the Outside World and Outshined and Black Hole Sun and Fell on Black Days, and you can go on and on and on. Of course, now it makes me talk about him and his death and the choices he made. So she actually has a valid argument. But it got me thinking, so let's say, your loved one commits suicide. What exactly is the best course of action at that point? Do you lock everything away and try to forget, or do you try to remember and celebrate their life? And if you try to remember and celebrate their life, you're basically walking around with an open wound that never heals. There's no, you do have a grieving process, but you always have this open wound. Every time I hear Chris Cornell now, I just think, oh my God, he walked off stage, 2 months ago and took his life. And that's, it got me thinking, like, what exactly is the strategy here? Like, you take a guy like Hemingway, his father killed himself, his brother killed himself, his sister killed herself, and he ultimately killed himself, and then to go to Margot, and Margot ultimately killed herself, right? What is the best course of action here? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. That's a heavy question.
Well, we're going to have Marsh Epstein here in a few minutes, and she's going to give her insight on that question.
Oh, great.
I just wanted to pose it to you because,
I think that, like you were saying before, I don't know if I'm answering it right, but I think that, like, I remember someone a long time ago where I worked, there was a person and her husband overdosed, and I remember the job gave her like 3 days or something off, and there was, I don't know, it was just weird the way she explained it, like you had 3 days to get over that, and I think that it's something that, you know, I think that there is no there's no limit to grieving. You know, like some people think you should get, you know, there's a certain amount of time to get over it, you know, where you let yourself grieve or whatever. But I think people grieve or mourn, you know, for their whole lives, you know. That I know,
Right.
I remember one of my favorite lines is from The Seagull by Anton Chekhov. Right in the beginning, someone asks, I forgot her name, but they said, "Why are you always wearing black?" And she responded, "Because I'm in mourning for my life." You know, and I don't know, people they think that celebration is the only thing to do, or there should be a limit to mourning, but maybe you should celebrate and mourn things, you know, your whole life long. You know, I think celebrating and mourning are, you know, they're the opposite sides that are inseparable. You know, so you know, I remember I wrote a poem where I said I refused to wear a watch because I didn't want to mourn the loss of every second because it made me conscious. So,
Right.
and I find
And
myself,
even when you talk
it's
about the
weird.
calendars,
It's weird. Talk about um, the phone being used for weird things. I remember a really close friend of mine uh, I had, you know, knows that I have like this OCD, and I'm always worried about the the cat getting out. You know, I didn't want the cat getting out, and did I shut the door? So they suggested maybe take a photo with your phone of the door as you leave to show that you know that you close the door, you know, so you're not an hour away, you know, and thinking, did I shut the door? Did I pull the door shut? And I find myself sometimes doing that with the stove because I have a gas stove. And I look back at the photos before I delete them, and I see the time on the stove because it has a clock, and I kind of feel sad, even though it wasn't the big moment. It was just like this really mundane moment where it's just like an ordinary day, and but I see the time and that loss, that, you know, that the stove at that time said 3:07 p.m. and, you know, and I think, you know, that's over with or whatever, and I kind of mourn for the loss of that, someone would say, insignificant time, you know, like that, but it's still time, like you said, that has gone by. It's like, you know, time is the enemy, the assassin. So it's weird. Yeah. So I don't know. I find myself mourning everything, like the loss of ordinary moments, the loss of celebrities like Chris Cornell, or the loss of a, 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 a possum on the side of the road that no one shoveled up, you know, and, or, you know, I don't know, just everything. I don't know. It sounds crazy maybe, but, you know, and I also celebrate things too, but of course, but I don't know. I don't know. I think mourning is part of the human nature, and a lot of people don't do it. You know, they just bury it, but it's eating away, I think, inside. If you don't get that feeling, like if you're, you know, that you feel sad about the loss of something large or small or whatever, you know. So so suicide should definitely be mourned for life, I think, you know. Like, I mean, you don't have to get depressed about it for the rest of your life, but you could have time to think about it and mourn it whenever you know, that you feel that need to, you know, feel bad about something. And of course, you have to balance it. I wouldn't say to mourn forever, just want, you know, don't, not celebrating anything and just mourning. But I don't know. I'm just rambling then.
no, that makes perfect sense because, you know, it's like, for instance, when Cornell committed suicide, and like I said, I've been listening to this guy for decades, man. I mean, nothing changed. All of a sudden now I could actually watch the last concert he ever gave, and he committed suicide that night. So I watched this concert, then I'm imagining him 20 minutes later committing suicide. Watching that footage, you know, was producing like a fog, like a heavy fog in my brain, and it hurt. but I kept watching, you know, and I kept listening in the van and in the house and in the yard. I mean, I didn't stop anything I did. And it was like, whenever I'd hear him sing, it produced this fog of sadness, and I just kept going and going and going. And now I guess I've started the grieving process, right? Like, he's dead, he's gone, he committed suicide. I'm still going to enjoy his music. I might look at his music a bit differently, but I'm still going to enjoy it. I'm going to keep going. So now I can listen to it and it doesn't send me into that dark place, you know? But it's weird because you know, insanity is when you have one thought that drives out every other thought from your brain. So let's say, you know, Chris Cornell's suicide, it becomes my only thought. And as the days go by and the days go by, Chris Cornell committed suicide starts to drive all the other thoughts from my brain until that's the only thought in my brain. That's the waking thought in my brain. Now all of a sudden time stands still. And I'm living in the past. I'm now, so time has moved forward 2 months, but I'm still in the past. It's destroyed everything I am. And now I start to feel like I'm starting to rot. I'm trapped inside a photograph and I'm starting to rot here. I'm looking through the mask of somebody who no longer exists. And I've always said, you know, woe to the person whose demon no longer lives, right? Like, if you can, because the only way to get through madness is to confront your madness, confront the very thing that's driving you mad, so that the story can go forward, so that you can progress beyond that point. So you're no longer living in the past, you're no longer tripped in a photograph, you're no longer this captive to this thought that has taken over your brain. So, you know, it really had me thinking, like, you know, if your loved one has committed suicide or someone you love has committed suicide, then, you know, is it really the best thing to keep that memory alive? Which is what you're saying. I mean, you mourn it for life, and you do, but you need, that story needs to go forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
You can't function in society when everything that you were no longer exists. Like, you're just so self-centered. Like, I mean, when suicide appeared as an option to me, I was pacing for like 8-9 hours a day. What really drove me nuts is when I looked and I see that I'd actually worn a tread in the rug around my dining room table, and that my cat was pacing with me. So I would pace for 9 hours walking around this table, because pacing gives you the illusion of going forward. But then to look back and realize that my cat was actually pacing with me, I mean, I knew I was in trouble, you know? So
and the cat,
it's a matter of mourning that suicide, but still managing to, you must start the grieving process. Like, you must come to terms. That thought can't stop you dead in your tracks.
No.
You know, here on the Madman Morning Show, we love to have guests, and today we welcome Marsha Epstein. Marsha, are you there?
I am here. Hello,
Excellent.
Wolf and Rob. I'm excited about this.
I taped your card up to the wall.
Aww. And I'm sitting in my dining room, which is where I record, with the painting of Bo that, Rob, you created. The book Acts for the Frozen Sea sits beside me because I use so many of those exercises with people that I work with, and they love them. And of course, my favorite magnet of when Sammy was diagnosed with bone cancer from Wolfgang Carstens.
Oh, thank you.
You know, it's interesting because that's exactly what we're talking about, right? Like, you know, life has no intrinsic value. So we're giving value to our own lives. And I mean, it sounds like you two and me as well. Like, my office is basically a treasure trove of things that I've tacked to the wall and have on the desk. And I get to see on a daily basis, because that gives my life meaning. It helps me understand why my life has meaning.
Yes.
So we were talking before about, you know, so let's say suicide. So let's say your loved one commits suicide. Do you think that desensitizes you to the idea that perhaps that's a viable option for me? We were talking about Hemingway, how Hemingway's father brother, sister, all committed suicide. Then Hemingway committed suicide, and then his granddaughter, Margot Hemingway, committed suicide. So we were also talking about Chester Bennington from Lincoln Park, who just recently committed suicide by hanging, on Chris Cornell's what would have been his 53rd birthday, who committed suicide by hanging on May 18th, which is also the date that Ian Curtis, a guy who Chris Cornell personally loved and respected, committed suicide by hanging. So do you find there is a trend? Like if you have a loved one, is that common in your experience where suicidal people have someone close to them who have committed suicide?
There's so many ways to answer that question, and I'm going to start with the Vegas, which is the vaguest as opposed to Las Vegas. That about half of us, people in general, have been touched by suicide loss. So clearly that doesn't mean we all die of suicide. So that's part of the answer, is that it's not a one cause. It's not something that you must choose to take an action and end up dying by suicide. It's all complicated. That's the thing. So do some people who die of suicide have the experience of losing somebody super close to them, somebody they really admire? Some do. Do some people find that as a reason that they believe they would never die by suicide? Some do. Do some people believe they would never die from suicide and then looks like they end up doing that? That too. So where does that leave us?
Well, from my point of view, where that leaves us is there a common thread for people who commit suicide? Is it, because I mean, we've talked about, if I give my life meaning, that's meaning that I've given my life. It doesn't apply to you. It doesn't apply to Rob. It doesn't apply to our listeners. It doesn't apply to anyone else other than me, because I am the only one who can give my life value.
Right.
So is there a common thread between people who have basically, you know, either they've made a plan, they've bought a gun, they have sleeping pills, they have, like Chris Cornell, I believe, totally planned that out. I mean, let's face it, he did on May 18th. He had the exercise band, he had the carbiner clip. I mean, it was almost nonchalant the way it happened, like it took the world by surprise. So is there a common element as far as, you know, someone comes to you and they're like, okay, Marsha, I'm depressed, I'm suicidal, this is why. What is the why? Like, I know you just said there's lots of different answers, but is there a common element?
Well, the basic why is I can't bear what life is, and I've tried, and it's pain I can't bear. But see, for listeners who don't know me and my sort of professional background, I've been immersed in the world of suicide prevention for a very long time, and so I'm aware of things that we know from the limited research, and I'm aware of things that I know from all the work that I do with people who are a combination. I don't only work with people who are thinking about suicide, but a lot of the people I work with are people who are thinking about suicide, who've made suicide attempts, and people who have lost really close people to suicide. And sometimes there are people who have both experiences of suicide attempts and suicide loss. Okay, so the overall message is, when we don't believe that we are valued, when we believe we're a burden, when we believe we do not belong, and we have acquired the capability to do the damage to our body that could end our body, those three things are the things that lead to people dying of suicide. But what I know, even in saying that, is that it's not something we can predict, and it's not something the individual can necessarily predict. So the answer is, it goes back to the writing that you guys do, the art that you create and put out in the world. We need to live our lives. We need to do the things we want to do. we do need to be kind and compassionate with people in our lives and reach out to them, because you never know who's at that point where one more thing is going to be the too many things. But I sadly believe that sometimes that switch flips without anybody, even the person themselves, being able to predict it. So where does that leave us? Do everything you can to be good to yourself and other people. That's where it leaves us.
Right. And I mean, I 100%, like, that's gorgeous. That's absolutely spot on. Perfect. So let me ask you, so to find value in an essentially meaningless life, and knowing that value comes from within, and I'm guessing, you know, if you're suicidal and you truly believe that, you know, this is the way to go, this is the beautiful idea, this is the grand escape scheme, your job, in a sense, must be strategies for helping these people find their own value beyond the tragedy, beyond their loved one killing themselves, or beyond their struggle with to meet the basic needs or whatever it is. So what are those strategies? Like, how do we heal somebody who's so far in a dark place that I need a 6-foot ladder just to go down and talk to them?
Right. And there is that piece that every single person knows darkness. Not everybody knows it 6 foot deep, like you just said, but everybody knows it some. And everybody, you know, we can all think about, what do I do when I start heading that direction? And to me, that's really key, because, and I think I explained this to you in another context in a way that really I've repeated as an explanation. You know, when I'm working with somebody as a helper, as I'm collaborating with them, what we're working on is, let's build some skills. So you got to give me some time. You got to commit to working with me for some time while we're working on building some skills. And then we can work on that transition to what convinces you that you're headed towards life that you really want to live, that you feel valued, you feel belonged, you have times that you feel joyful, that you laugh, and we all have hard times sometimes, you know, but we can't make that journey without figuring out what are the tools that we need to get there. And that means you got to stick around for a while to get there, to try to get there. So a lot of it is like, well, what do I do when I feel like shit? Well, you know, there's a certain amount of stuff that I just do, reflecting my, you know, thinking about it myself, kind of, you know, trying to, like, what is going on? And there are certain times when I realize I gotta do something. And for me, that might be listening to certain music. It might be taking a walk. I really like outside. You know, so it's like the first set of things is, well, what is that person going to say? These are some of the things that I actually do that are really kind of help me when I'm not feeling so good. And then what are things that I do that are like social distraction? Somebody said, I watch boring shit on Netflix, and it's enough to keep my attention, but it doesn't stress me out in any way, and it gets me not thinking about the stuff that's going on. Somebody else might say, well, I have this friend who's always got a litany of shit to talk about, and so I talk to him, and then I focus on him instead of me. You know, there's no right or wrong answer for any of the steps, but the skills that we try to figure out as a starting point are, you know, what do you do for yourself? What do you do that's a distraction? Who are your go-to people? You know, who can you call, email, text, whatever, at 3 o'clock in the morning because your head is full of darkness and you need somebody to help poke some light in there, you know? And yeah, there are all those crisis services too that become a layer higher, you know, a more, not the first resort. I think that's the thing, is that we need to learn, and sometimes we've forgotten how to do this. We need to learn how to do the things ourselves and with our support networks, because that's really where we start. Nobody. I'm not going to call a crisis line because I've had a bad day as my starting point. So why would I tell somebody else to do that, you know? So we work on those skills, and I have this, I guess I'm a pretty visual person, because I think about that we sort of travel these paths that we're used to traveling. We stay on this road, we stay on this path in the woods. We're used to doing it. We go on it. It's a really worn groove. We head that way, even though if we think about it, we realize I hate where it gets me. And that's that darkness stuff. So we start looking at how you can take these other things as detours off that road. So instead of staying on that road, when I realize that my body aches because I'm so freaking tense, I take one of those detours, and my detour might be that music that I love, and that might be the first one. And I do some of those things. And if I end up wandering back to that road that gets me to darkness, then that's when I try the next thing. It's like, okay, I need something else. You know, what's my distraction thing that really works for me? So there's that part of, you know, changing the paths that we take. And another part for me is that we have these big old thought balloons that we have accumulated, sometimes starting in really early childhood. And the thought balloons say things like, you're really a fuck up. You really don't do anything right. And so my image of that is that, so we start poking holes in it with things that are truths. Like, well, you know, actually, my friend just told me how when we went and sat and drank coffee and talked, how it really, really made a difference. And in fact, you know, she's making a better choice because of that conversation. So I can't always be a fuck up, right? You know? And so we start bringing in these truths, and eventually that big old thought balloon deflates, and we no longer have that carrying around with us, that everything I do is wrong. So those are the kinds of things that I encourage people to work with me on. And it's very individual. It's not like, here's your list of things to do. It's like, what works for you? Right. What are some of those thoughts that you have? Write them down, look at them, make a big old poster and put it on your refrigerator, and then write things that contradict that lie that you've been carrying around all this time. You know, it's like, however it works for you to make it you making those changes. That's to me what helps people get to that point where, okay, so I can tolerate the disappointments and the bad luck and the stuff that happens, because I also realize that I'm a good person and I have these things that are really special talents and interests. And, you know, there are things I love in my life, and I'd forgotten that. I'd stopped looking at those when I was only looking at the hard stuff.
Yeah,
that's the kind of stuff I think we can do.
Well, I was wondering, like, you talk about it, and how far does find something you're passionate about, something that you're good at, something that you want to excel at, factor into that equation, right? Like, you're talking about special talents and focusing on that. My experience with madness was like, let's say every day it was the same equation, right? It was A, B, C, D, E, closed fist. Once we hit E, and you talked about this pattern, right? Once you hit E, you internalize everything, and then you're pacing. You're pacing around the room for hours and hours and hours. You're walking the streets because it gives you the illusion of moving forward. So how do you break that pattern? Is it looking at what happened and then trying to find the next step? And also, how far does your own passion, what am I passionate about? How does that play?
And sometimes, you know, it's like, I don't give a shit about anything. That's how bad I feel. You know, nothing is good. And so that can happen. The story of getting to that point where I'm so overwhelmed that all I can do is pace, you know, my response to that from the, like, what does it look like as helping somebody is, well, we want to learn to recognize before I get to that point when all I can do is pace. We want to, like, what are the signals that mean I'm heading there? There are physical sensations, there might be emotions, there might be thoughts. there might be certain kinds of situations that bring that. So in the current time, somebody might have been doing pretty okay, but then they learn about Chester Bennington's death, and it's like, oh my God, if he could do this too, and that situation gets them in a downward spiral. Okay, so then we know that there are certain things that can happen that mean we got to kick in our plan. That means, shit, I got this news. I need to do something for me, or else I'm going to get in this really dark place. And when I think about gifts and passions, it's not like we have to be a superstar at anything. Yesterday, when I went to the grocery, I was in the line of a cashier who has this huge smile always. And I said to her, you know, it's always a pleasure coming into your line because you're always so kind and you have this big smile. And I don't know whether people say anything to you about that. I hope that your store manager says something, but you give people a huge gift when you do that, you know? It's not that you're only a cashier. You're also this person who is paying attention to other people and generating kindness. And that can make a huge difference in people's days. So that is one of her superpowers, you know? It's not, you know, that I can get on the stage and do this, but in real life, that's one of her superpowers. And I wanted her to know that. I don't know anything about her, but I know the effect that she has on me, and I see it on other people too. So we sometimes need to get reminders, and then we get to that point of, okay, I am a good person, and that's cool that I can do something that makes a difference in somebody else's life. I think that's part of what most of us yearn for, you know, is that sense of we believe that we're valued, and nobody can just give that to us. But sometimes people can remind us. They can be a mirror. Sometimes there's that. And honestly, there are some times when people need to borrow hope. I've had somebody say to me, if the only reason I can stay alive right now is because of you, let me use you as the reason.
Right.
Because my belief is I can't keep anybody alive and I don't kill anybody. You know, it's a collaborative thing, but that person who's living it is the one who's really doing the work. And as I say that, you know, they're in the limited time, because I actually have to go in a minute because I am meeting with somebody who I help in this way. I think about, one, losing people anyway. Death for somebody that we had hoped to have in our life longer, it sucks. It's sad. But love is what it's all about, and love is wonderful. Guilt tends to come up with death, and so you know what? I say, you feel however you feel, but the truth is we don't have power over anybody else's life. You know, that's really important. That's my toner saying you need to get to something else. So for people who are having a hard time, and we all do sometimes, but when it gets really bad, try to remember that there are things that you can do. There are people that you can turn to in your own life. Try to remember that it's a good thing to find those people, as opposed to believing that you're a terrible person because you know, whatever messages you have about emotional pain, because we all feel it sometimes, you know, and sometimes it sneaks up on us, and sometimes the intensity sneaks up on us. And if we're one of those people who has that tendency, it's a whole lot safer if you don't keep the dangerous stuff you think about using to end your life, if you don't keep that in easy access, you know. I know people who have their partners literally lock up their medications. I know people who have guns in their household, and there are times when the one who's not at risk of suicide takes those guns, keeps them in the trunk of car that the other person doesn't have a key to, does whatever to make it that much more difficult. But, you know, even like when you talked about the deaths that have happened and how it looks like, you know, gosh, it looks like he was so ready to do that. Some of that stuff is just stuff we have. And yeah, we've had thoughts. Most people have had thoughts about suicide at some point, you know, and sometimes that even is thoughts about how you do it. But that doesn't mean that, you know, you're going to do it at a certain moment. But when we're in that darkness a lot, then it's good to not have it be easy to get to whatever would end your life. So I remind everybody, do your best to love yourself, to have some fun, to do things that nourish that part of you, that help you feel good and help you have the energy to live life. Because we're all going to have bad shit that happens. It's real life.
Right.
And be a good friend to those people that you know. And when you have the energy, pay attention to people that you just see, you know. I don't know. I'm that person, one of those people who, you know, I might be walking in our little downtown area and see somebody who looks like they're really having a hard time, or somebody who's saying weird, angry shit. And I might stop and say, hey, you know, look them in the eye. You know, is there anything I can help with? You know, sometimes you do that with people you don't even know, and it can be a huge thing to make that difference. So do it. Live.
You know,
love.
what I love, Marcia, is that your strategy is very simple. I mean, it doesn't involve any hard and fast rules. Everybody is going to be different.
Right.
And also to find those moments that makes the person in need feel valued, right? Like whether it's having that big smile. Do you have a time when you've made someone brighten someone's day, made someone feel better? If you can focus on that, maybe that's a great place to start, you know, as opposed to going back to those fundamental questions. Ladies and gentlemen, the Madman Morning Show. Marcia Epstein, please. I know you have to go. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob and Wolf, for doing this, and we will talk again. So long.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So, Madman, those were some great tips.
Yeah, I love that that image of the. Well, I don't know what you referred it to, but it was like that bullshit thought bubble that, you know, causes you to think bad things about yourself, you know, and sometimes it could be hard, like it's like a, you know, like it's like a cement ball, and you have to hammer spikes into that, you know, to break out of that. It's a great image, though, you know, that.
Absolutely.
Well,
you know, it's interesting too, like when you talk about your childhood and of course my childhood and a guy like Chester Bennington, his childhood, you always have that thought bubble hanging above you, right? I remember this Sum 41 song where he talks about, you know what, it wasn't me who spilled the apple juice in the hallway. And even if it was, it really wasn't that bad, you know, and it breaks my heart because those are the thought bubbles hanging above these people's heads. You know, you're worthless. You're no good. You're a fuck up. You're fucking, you know, like in your poem, 15 Minutes, for example, you know, like the things your father says to you, you know, a vacation with this cocksucker is no vacation at all. You know, those are the thought bubbles that are sticking with us.
Yeah. So a lot of times you wind up, you know, it could be that you're that thought on, and, you know, cover it with smoke and stuff, but I don't know, sometimes I you know, that could help, but it irritates the thought bubble a lot of times. So I find that you know, that was a temporary fix for it, but the real thing is the writing or the painting or the, you know, or whatever, you know, whatever for me.
Right. Well, I'm a big believer that somehow that story has to take the next step. It can't end on that thought bubble. And that's the important thing, right? Because, you know, and especially when you start introducing drugs and alcohol and that into the equation, which of course, you know, delimits your vulnerability, right? So when I start drinking, if I'm completely drunk, I've taken a million shots of vodka, and I end up on that bubble, then I'm doomed, right? Like now I'm in a position where I'm not thinking clearly anymore. And you know what? Maybe I just could do it right now.
Yeah, that's true. You have to have the ability to step back, you know, to pull back. I mean, it's hard. It's hard. I guess if like you said, you become obsessed with that, so then it's like a hammer going off, you know, just hammering the same dark note in your head.
Exactly. Well, in my experience, that's exactly been my experience of madness, which is, you know what? The minute I wake up, there's like maybe 2 seconds of peace, and then the demon just sinks its claws into my brain and starts tearing, right? So when it gets to that point, I mean, it's a very extreme case, and maybe that's when you need to turn to somebody like Marsha Epstein, right? But I think she gave us some great advice, you know, like
Yeah.
to just find that moment, that instance, like how are you making a difference? What actually makes you feel good? I mean, I could be 99.9% depressed, but there's that 0.1% where I do this one thing and it makes me feel good. It makes me feel valuable. So
Yeah.
maybe we need to focus on that, right? And like
Yeah.
you talked about the
But
art.
sometimes it's hard work to do that. It feels like everything in you is fighting against that, but that's the way, I think. You know, it takes a lot of effort to do that, you know, to get up even on sunny days, and you feeling those feelings, and it feels like you're strapped down or something, like on a table somewhere, and it's hard to get the straps off and get out there, but that's the only way to do it, that I mean, it takes a long time to be able to get yourself, like sometimes people undo the straps for you in a way, I mean, that's the image, but to do them yourself takes a while to learn that, and you need people, I guess, to, I mean, there's a poem here I wrote in Death is Dead called Sweet Chai Tea, and it goes, could be writing more poems about my fucked up boyhood, or all my dead loves, or my cosmic loneliness, or the weight of sobriety, but I'm drinking sweet chai tea, listening to the radiator ticking, happy my blood is still warm and Cadaverville is still miles away. But that took a long time to get to a state like that. Like a lot of times I was obsessed with all the things that I could have been writing about that were in my head. So it takes work and help, and like she said.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's amazing. You know what, Madman? I want you to stick with me here. I know that we're coming to the end of this episode, but I want you to just stick with me. Ladies and gentlemen, Madman Morning Show with Rob Plath and Wolfgang Carstens, Tom Waits, Miseries of the World. Misery is the river of the world.
Shows his tail. Cold no man happy till he dies. There's no milk at the bottom of the pail. God built the church, the devil built the chapel, like the thistles that are growing on the trunk of a tree. All the good in the world you can put inside a thing, still have room for you and me. If there's one thing you can say about mankind, there's nothing kind about man. You can drive out nature with a pitchfork, but it always comes roaring back again. Misery's the river of the world. Misery's the river of the world. Misery's the river Everybody move. Measure is the river of the world. Measure is the river of the world. Everybody roll. Everybody roll. Everybody roll. Everybody roll. Everybody roll. Measure is the river of the world. 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 Everybody roll. Everybody roll. Everybody roll.
All right, you're listening to the Madman Morning Show with Rob Plath and Wolfgang Carstens. And you know, Madman, I just wanted to say, man, I didn't want to end on that song because, you know, misery is not the river of the world. I mean, I value you. I value these shows. I value your friendship. And thank you to Marsha Epstein for coming on and talking so candidly and openly and passionately about suicide prevention. And I just wanted to wish you the best day possible, Madman.
Oh, thanks, Will. Yeah, that song, I don't know. It's weird, I guess, you know, like after talking, it's a great song, but at the same time, you know, it's, I guess it's about, you know, acceptance and then keep going down
Absolutely.
the river. Just keep
well,
going.
you know, it's interesting because we talked about this earlier, and it's like, you know, if you don't have those, if you haven't answered those fundamental questions, if you haven't searched inside for those answers, you know, for the want of a nail, the shoe is lost, right? It's like, it's not the big things that take you out. It suddenly becomes the little things, right?
Yeah.
Another great Mad Morning Show. We will return next Thursday, same time, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Madman, have a great motherfucking day, my friend.
You too, Wolf. It was a great.
Cheers.
It was great to be on the air again with you.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. And these are the small things that give my life meaning. So, you know, to everyone listening, you need to find out, how are you placing value in your life? What gives your life value? Find those moments, find those people, find those things, and latch on and make them grow. Cheers, Madman.